Director of IYBA, Paul Flannery.
Category of shameless self-promotion. Bob, we'll have a great panel up here a little later on. Our insurance specialists, if I could welcome you guys up to the stage. Ah, there you are. You guys shifted on me. So we're going to welcome Tom Gresh from Marsh McLennan. Marsh McLennan's a great supporter of this event. Mike Ramirez from Global Marine Insurance, and Rick Salway from Great American Insurance. We're going to have a little discussion about what's going on in the insurance world. I think we titled this thing, "What is Up with Insurance," guys? So, as has been mentioned many times, things are on fire. It's a completely different marketplace than we've ever dealt with before. And there are a lot of parameters in this marketplace that we've never experienced before as well. So I'm going to start right out, kick it off with you, Rick, and ask you, there's a lot of changes in the marketplace. There's a lot of changes in the way you guys are able to offer insurance. What's driving all that? What do you think is the biggest?
Well, hopefully it's not too many fires.
That was Lursen. That's over. They put that out.
This insurance market has stressed everybody, and it's not just Yacht that's been stressed. I think everybody in this room has probably seen their insurance bills going up. It really is summed up that everything that we thought wouldn't happen, happened, and there's things that we never thought of that have also happened. We've gone through a period, at least in yacht insurance, of chronic unprofitability over 15 to 20 years. I don't remember the 6 years of Latin that I took, but there was a saying that as Rome goes, so goes the world. Everybody, I'm sure, in this room is familiar with Lloyd's of London, and I would say the same thing. As Lloyd's of London goes, so goes the world. There was a period of time between 20 and 2016 that the Lloyd's Corporation looked at every single line of business and ranked them from best to worst, and they called it the deciles. Yacht finished in all of the Lloyd's of London insurance offerings the fourth worst performing line over that 4-year period. Had they looked back, it still would have been towards the bottom, compounded by 3 other marine insurance lines also being in the worst 10 performers. What that led to was also a look at 2018, where Lloyd's of London's yacht book of business gave away 180 cents for every dollar of business that they wrote. And that does not include expenses. That is a pure loss number.
That statistic was before the Lursen fire, too, if I'm not mistaken. The Lursen fire was 800 million euros heaped on top of that stat.
Exactly. And that spread across, there was not a person in this business, in the European business market, that did not have a piece of Lursen that was involved in writing marine insurance. The impact was immediate. Rather than people trying to correct books of business or take action, most of them left the marketplace. This time, 3 or 4 years ago, and Tom and Mike, you can probably confirm this, you probably had 20 insurance markets, probably down to 4 or 5 right now. The markets that remain are the stable markets. They're the markets that have been probably doing business. I've been doing business almost the same way for 20, 25 years now. Thorough underwriting. The other thing that's, with the lack of competition out there because of performance, we've been seeing much, much larger and severe claims. Well, I think people used to talk about, storms, and 14 of the last 15 costliest storms in North America happened since 2004. But also add the increased cost of lightning strikes, $1 million plus on a $6 million boat, which is probably an average yacht. Yard fires, Lursen certainly catching attention, but Lonigan up the road, fires in Dubai, and that impacts, it all goes back to London. And just from an insurance side is, low interest rates are great for spending, but they're bad for financial institutions that are seeking to invest in A-rated securities. So we're starting the year actually with a 4% loss just because of, in the insurance industry, just because of mean investment portfolios, mostly driven by zero, interest rates being low. Right. So financially, we're doing poorly as well because we need to invest in very, very highly rated investments.
So that's the business component of insurance, and it's a piece that we, in the trenches, we don't really look at that. I've never been made aware of it in the past, in that there's a business model that is significantly impacting our availabilities of insurance. There are some other factors that we'll get into in a few minutes. But Tommy, I want to touch base with you on, look, when you and I first start to know each other, I would call you and say, hey, I got a boat closing. It's Tuesday. I need to close this boat on Friday. Can you get me bound? I got acceptance of vessel. We're going to close. I need to do this quick. What's the scoop today with my Tuesday call to you trying to get it done on Friday?
Yeah, well, it's changed significantly, and I have a little PowerPoint there that is.
Well, at least you didn't laugh at me like you would have if I called you.
I would laugh at you. But what I used to do is call Rick up and say, hey, we got a boat, we're closing in tomorrow. Can we do it? He said, oh, send me information. He said, okay, no problem. It's bound. I mean, that was many, many years ago. Right. But it has changed, and mainly due to the capacity problems Rick just mentioned. We lost 70% of the companies we work with. So we're left with 4. They're seeing 50, 60 risks a day. So they're going to pick the best risks for their company. So what we need now is information. We need as much information as we can get, because I need to send it to Rick, and Rick is going to make the decision. So basically, we need the vessel details, the owner's personal details. The underwriters like Rick, he looks at not only the vessel, but the owner. Who's the vessel? What kind of profile does he have? If it's a larger boat, it's going to be good to show Rick that, hey, we have got a really good qualified captain and crew on this, and show him the resume up front. Their survey, if it's an older vessel, over 10, 12 years of age, I would rather submit, and I'll talk to the yacht broker and say, hey, what do you think about the boat? Is it in good condition? And they're like, hey, it's a great. Good, I want to get the survey to Rick when we submit the information to quote. Storm plan, not always required, but if we plan ahead and we can implement in the process and plan ahead, we can show this to Rick in advance of him making an underwriter decision. Owner's resume for owner-operator vessels, generally the companies are looking for the owner not to have more than a 15-foot jump in size in vessel. So if he's owned a 40-foot boat, they don't really want to see him going above 55 on the next vessel. Now, I mean, there's exceptions for everything. Can we work with underwriters and try to get something done? Sure. But if we're on marginal, if you know you're going to sell someone who's upgrading a larger boat, we want to get like an owner's operator resume, and that's going to show every boat he's ever owned. And then I would go as far as, well, has your family owned boats in the past? Oh yeah, my dad had a 70-foot boat. Okay, let's put that down. Have you operated on your friend's boats? Yeah, or it's when I'll go to Bahamas trip every year and my friends, whatever. So that will expand his experience if we're kind of marginal. Because all this information I have to send to Rick, okay? He needs to make a decision on it. So based on today's market, the more information he has, the better information he has to make a decision, more likely he's going to give me a quote, and more likely it's going to be a competitive quote. So actually today, I'm thinking, when I go to the market, hey, I don't want to get a declination. I want to get a quote. So let me get as much information as possible. And collecting that information takes more time. So when you say, hey, we're closing tomorrow, it's difficult to get all the information to the underwriters for them to get them to make a decision.
Before we go to the next slide, Tommy, let me just ask you a question. So we've got a little bit longer lead time than we had in the past. There's a whole lot more demand. The underwriter's a guy or a couple of guys, and you've only got girls, excuse me. And you only got X number of hours in the day, and there's a high demand on you, so it's not like you're sitting there waiting for the phone to ring, tapping your fingers. Can we submit some of that information? You mentioned he's going to need a survey. Well, they've always needed a survey. Can he submit some of that information about the deal, the owner, the potential captain, where the boat's going to be, what sort of storm plans would look like, and get maybe a pre-approval like we would in the financing world pending a satisfactory survey? Or do we have to wait till we have the survey to be able to submit the whole package?
Well, on an older vessel, some of the underwriters will not quote it. I mean, I'm not saying there is an exception for anything, but if it's an older vessel, 15 years old, they're going to, if I send them something, they're going to say, we want to see a survey before we quote.
Can we facilitate the process and get ready for a quote by having that other information at hand prior to being able to submit the survey?
Sure,
And then have the survey as that last piece and then say,
Of course, yeah,
okay,
the
yeah,
survey's
it
not
all,
always
it all
ready.
lines up. So that way if
I'll
you've got a
talk to the
guy who's got
underwriter.
6 bankruptcies,
Yeah.
well, maybe he's not going to get approved.
No,
so
we'll
don't
have that
bother
submitted,
sending
and
the
I'll say, okay, listen, okay, well, here's the information we have now. Maybe I'll get the hurricane plan to help it out and say, hey, but the survey's being this day, we'll get it 2 days later. So they're on standby. They have all the basic information they need, but they can wait for the survey, of course, because it's not always ready. The other thing I also do was help recently. What I've done is, especially on the older boats, is taking your listings and sending it to Rick. So actually, the listing's been helping out recently. The nicer it looks, the more details on it. If there's been a refit, if it explains that. Rick's looking at the Yachtworld listings, and he goes, wow, the boat looks great. It looks in really good condition. And usually the survey backs that up.
So a really elegant listing presentation can be helpful, huh?
It is, yeah.
Okay. So give us a little bit more on your PowerPoint.
Okay. So what do we need to bind? So we got the quote. Rick gave us a quote. It's a great quote. Owner says, okay, we're closing tomorrow. We got to bind. Things have changed dramatically on this front. When I first started in the business, or even when I was a captain, Rick was in the business as well. We could email Rick an application. He goes, okay, bound. That was about it. And then maybe storm plans in 2003 or 4 came around. But they would always pen that. Okay, get us a storm plan. We agreed to it. The world has changed, and it has evolved. Underwriters are asking for a lot more information to bind, and they're reviewing this information before they're willing to issue coverage. Now, not all the companies are looking for all of these details, but many of them are. And like I said, there's always an exception. It depends on the client and what company you work with. Obviously, a signed application, and run through them real quick. Copy of the hull survey and an engine survey with recommendations. Sometimes we get the hull survey, and there's no engine survey. So we need the engine survey. We need the recommendations. The owner's going to have to sign a letter of survey compliance for the survey. Captain's license and resume. The company's going to want to approve that captain before they bind coverage. Normally, and some companies want a statement from the captain that he's had no losses. This is pretty simple. It can be done by an email. Some companies, like I said, that's not all companies. They're all a little different, but all these could be required. Captain's verification letter, and that's a statement from the owner saying the captain is employed on a full-time basis, and he has no other professional responsibilities. So they want a statement from the owner saying this. Some of the companies do. An approved storm plan. Right now, as we're entering hurricane season, I would say should be engaged sooner than later in the process, because the companies will want to look at the storm plan before they bind coverage, and they're going to be a lot more critical of these plans since we're ending hurricane season. Copy of the haul lot contract. It's not always required by every company, but I could get surprised from someone if they read this, if the underwriter, Rick, says, oh, I see they're hauling the boat out. Can you send me a copy of the contract? So they could ask for it. Navigation itinerary, pretty standard. Just says, hey, what's your general navigation, to make sure we have the navigation correct on the policy. Confirmation of single asset. Some companies, if you're titling the vessel in a corporation or LLC, the company is going to ask me, hey, confirm with the owner that this is a single asset. He has no other businesses or any other properties owned in this LLC, because they don't want any contamination with other liability exposures. Normally, that's pretty easily done with an email confirmation. Triple and engine quad vessels, proof and confirmation of activated GPS tracking system. You can pretty much, it's a golden rule if you have a triple or quad engine boat, you need to have a GPS tracking system on the boat and activated. Some companies, it's a strict warranty in the policies, and some companies actually ask for proof that this is activated before they will bind coverage. copy of the closing statement. That can usually come afterwards, but that is to quantify their insured value with the purchase price, their agreed value policy. So the purchase price and the purchase price and insured value needs to match up to that, and that's how they look at that. So some companies, not all companies, but some companies will require the premium up front, but not all companies do. And there's always exception. You know, it might be 6 out of these 12, but it's certainly going to be a mixed match of that. So It has changed from many years ago when, like I said, it was an easy phone call. I remember with Rick, Christmas Eve, I think it was Christmas Eve, I got a quote from Rick on a Christmas Eve day, and we bound it at 6 o'clock over the phone. I mean, that was, I think, 7 years ago. He might do it again today, but those days are pretty much gone.
It depends on which Christmas.
Correct.
Okay.
But Tom also is touching on an important part too, is relationships count too.
Sure they do.
You know, I walked away from dinner on a Thursday night to approve a captain for Tom because the owner's leaving for the Bahamas tomorrow.
So we got a little sense of what's going on in the business world of it. We got a little sense of what has changed with regard to getting coverage and how we need to be planning ahead and looking forward a little bit more than we used to. There's another big piece of the market that's changed significantly, Mike, and that's all these high-performance, large center console boats. It's something that just plain didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Right. There might have been a smattering of 1 or 2 here and there. Now, you go out on the Intercoastal and stand by the 17th Street Bridge, and that's all you see is 350 horsepower, you know, triples and quads everywhere you go. How has that impacted things?
Well, they're just tough to get done now. So the carriers put a lot of, a lot of requirements. If the customer had prior claims, if he's owned a triple or a quad before, they have to have GPS tracking systems. So it's just a combination. They can get done, obviously, as you can see. You know, there's so many out there, and it's such a high-selling boat. But they are getting tougher to get done, especially in the Tri-County area, Miami-Dade counties, where it's really starting to get a bit narrow.
Is that because of congestion? Is that because of high theft?
I think it's a combination of the type of boat. They're higher value, they go faster, they're larger, but obviously it's the theft. And that's why, as Tom said, they're requiring GPS tracking systems on it. I mean, there's a lot of money behind that boat. You know, and it's a quick turnaround. They steal it, and the next day they find that boat, and it has no engines and no electronics. Yeah, and so you know you're better off stealing a quad than you are a single. So it's definitely high target.
You're 4 times better off, I would think.
You're 4 times. You make 4 times the money. and your punishment's the same. So you might as well do the.
Sounds like a good business model.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, the ethics discussion will take place after lunch.
Yeah. To add to Mike's comments on the theft, the issue I've had with the theft and the GPS tracking, I'm not saying I'm not a proponent of the GPS tracking, but it's a boat gets stolen, who do you call? They're really not interested until it's coming back into the country, because it's either has humans or other drugs or something else illicit on it. So I look for on the triples and the quads and even the singles and the twins is what's the theft plan in advance. And it could be as simple as just taking rubber wrap chain that you bought at Home Depot and some padlocks and wrapping it around the aft drives. It takes 5 minutes, and it's a pain in the neck, but it's going to slow them down or stop them. And those have been tricky, and the problem also is there's so many of them that have been being sold. It's hard to keep up with them. And the price point on those are going to should be north of $2 rates. We have situations where guys have second boats, and they're paying almost as much or even sometimes more insurance for their triple and their quad than they are for their 80-foot yacht.
Well, that brings an interesting question up as well. So in our marketplace today, we're seeing a lot of people come in that aren't starting out with a 13-foot whaler or a 23-foot contender or something like that. We got people that are stepping into the marketplace at 75 feet. How do you address that? What do you do? I mean, is there any risk in there?
Well, depending on the size of the boat, you may have a full-time captain requirement.
Okay.
If the boat's under that 70-foot range, then it could be owner operated, but they're tougher to get done. You know, if it's a first-time boat owner trying to just get into that kind of a boat, we're very limited in the markets that we have for that. The days of carriers accepting captain sign-offs, like, hey, this guy's going to train, and once he's good to operate the boat, the captain will sign him off, and we're good to go. Those days are gone. There's very few carriers. So jump in ownership sizes, first-time boat owners, prior claims. That's huge now.
And they'll look at claims on your car or your house or other pieces of your life as well, don't they?
Well, those generally don't get reported for the boat. We're more concerned on boating insurance claims.
Okay.
But you have a bad enough claim, and I mean, Rick could attest to it. I mean, you might have a hard time getting coverage just because they don't, claims are definitely scrutinized now.
Okay. All right. Tommy, with regard to crew, you'd mentioned, having to have your crew assigned, your captain's full-time employment verification letter. Is qualified crew becoming harder to obtain? Are you having higher scrutiny on who the crew member is? I'm a 23-year-old guy. Well, that's been a long time ago, but a 23-year-old guy with a 500-ton master's license. You put him up on the bridge of a new 80-foot Viking. Is that a problem?
No problem at all.
No, let her eat. If you don't mind a $72,000 premium, right?
I was going to laugh at a Rick on that one. But yeah, but recently, I can tell you, even if you talk to the captains, crew is a problem. They can't get first officers, engineers, captains. I guess I don't know, I guess they're all employed. But it is a problem. Just because you have a license doesn't mean you're qualified to operate a 500-ton vessel at all. So it definitely, they look at your experience as a captain, not necessarily the size of your license. I mean, I don't know what the companies are going to do, but they do scrutinize. I don't think it's been more scrutinized, but probably a little bit more. But what we're seeing now is actually of companies scrutinizing the first officer. It's like, no, we're not going to approve the first officer. I'm like, come on, the first officer, come on, please. So we are seeing some strength in that. I don't know what's going to happen. But probably advice for you guys is start looking for those crew early and get a good pipeline of them, or just start early looking for them, because it is a problem.
What about the owner that has his own captain's license?
Well, if we're talking about, if we're talking about larger yachts where it requires a full-time captain, just because the owner has a captain's license doesn't mean he can qualify as the captain of or the full-time captain. The captain requirement is an employment status. So it's not really the owner's ability to operate his 70-foot boat, which he probably can. And some owners say, I can operate it better than the captain I got. So why can't I be the full-time captain? Well, it's an employment status. It's about employing someone to take care and maintain and operate that multi-million-dollar yacht while the owner is doing his other things. So it's really more of an employment status than the owner's ability to operate the boat. One thing I wanted to talk about, I think Mike mentioned, you were talking about like first-time boat owners. And it's not really even it's not only a problem for like triples and quads, it's a problem for big boats.
Right. Well, that's one of the questions that we were talking about, was the guy over 60 feet who enters in for the first time.
So if he has a full-time, even with a full-time captain, let's just say 80-foot boat. Guy's done really well, successful guy, 80-foot boat, 100-foot boat, never owned a boat before. It's going to be challenging. It's not a slam dunk. I never saw this problem before, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. It's great. He's got the money, he's paying cash. It's like, there wasn't a lot of question. I mean, they look at his profile a little bit, but now they are, because they're questioning, well, this guy's buying an $8 million boat. Does he really know what it takes to, what it's going to take in cost and crew and to operate this boat? And we're getting a lot of pushback on it. So first-time guys entering the yacht market, they're going to look at the client's profile. And I'm asking questions like, has he ever chartered boats before? I mean, that shows some experience, right? He's been on his friends' boats before. Also, what has been really important, probably in the last 6 months, which has helped me with some clients, is hiring a management company. You got getting a 100-foot boat, okay?
Absolutely.
Listen, these companies are going to decline them. I mean, most likely. I'm not saying there's an exception for everything. But the companies say, well, is there a management company being hired? I think it's a great question. So maybe for the first year, you need a management company to help them guide them through those challenges of boat ownership that he's never done before.
So the underwriters are taking a little bit more of a 30,000-foot view of the guy himself and his previous experience, and if he understands what he's getting into, as well as just the boat and where it's going to be and how it's going to be maintained.
We always have. I'm going to suggest, especially the 4 or 5 carriers that are still out there actively writing business and looking for a sustainable business so that you guys you can sell boats and we can continue to insure them and keep commerce going. But I mean, just last week, 4 years ago, I would not have entertained a first-time buyer on a 100-foot yacht. Just, they don't have the experience. That's what Lloyd's is for. Lloyd's isn't there anymore. Responding to folks in this room, conversations on the docks, conversations, feedback from Tom, from Mike, from Nancy, from John Jarvie in the background. We have new owners and we need to get this stuff done. I look around the room and, you know, people buying boats from professionals like you is meaningful. It's not an impulse buy. If somebody says, if Tom tells me that the broker's been working, you guys have been working with the guy, for the family for 3 months, and you know, you may even have a charter operation and they've been a charter customer for 4 or 5 years, that means something to us. You know, Tom talks about what's required to get insurance and bind insurance. That may not be required, but that's great for us to know because it puts me at ease if I'm putting up $7 million of my company's capacity to cover risk.
So you're covering risk, and of course there's a price to pay for that. Premiums have gone up.
Yes.
What's happening now with premiums going up and then guys wanting to renew their insurance and the premiums going up again? Yeah. Why is that?
Well, as I mentioned before, 15 years of stupidity, and I was part of it. You know, we had 20 companies chasing around, and I think you had mentioned there's 7,000 boats in yachtbroker.org right now. 4 years ago, there were 20 of us chasing that business around, and you know, you've got to
be competitive
premium to do it, and not all of us went down that path. But now we're responding to it. But we're not going to fix this thing over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. It's going to be something that we need to do. I look back to post Katrina, post Wilma was real. That was the first gray hair that I got, and a lot of them. And that's when we started getting into name storm deductibles and asking to make sure the captains were full-time. That was a game changer, I think, for us in terms of the information we required. But we also didn't rush into 100% increases at that time. We didn't, when we corrected things, we took them in increments. And I'm going to suggest we're doing the same thing now, but the increments margins are much higher. They're going to be 12 and 13 and 14% because we dug ourselves a hole that far down. Nobody was complaining when the prices were low. Now they're complaining when the prices are high, but we're still not there for sustainability. The other piece of this is just the unpredictability of it. COVID. On our business, and following Ed earlier, I think somebody mentioned you never want to follow a Dixieland band or a stripper. Well, following Ed was great because I think he really laid out the economy of what we're facing, or at least reinforced it, because I'm sitting here, I've been spending the last bunch of months figuring out how I'm going to get parts for German engines. The plants were closed for all these years. Now they're reopening, or for a year. Now they're reopening. Boats are stuck off of Long Beach. They can't make port. Our electronics are on those boats. So if I can't get them into the country, that's now adding to yard costs. And these costs can't be absorbed. I don't, I'm not going to name any yards, but I don't think anybody's going to say, well, you can't get your boat fixed till August. It's been here since February, so I'm not going to charge you just because you can't get it fixed. They're going to be charging their couple dollars a foot every single day. That costs me money, and that drives the losses up in an environment that was already unprofitable. So, that's the unpredictable piece. And now, you mentioned just the effect of a Texas storm, and I would add all of the hurricanes we had that hit, the Lake Charles area, Louisiana, where there's nothing but refineries. Thankfully, there's not boats in that area, but the resin and a lot of the oils and stuff that we need are there. So, I talked to a couple boat builders over the last couple of weeks preparing for this, and it's not like what's the cost of resin, it's how am I going to get it? I sit here and I wonder when I look at any boat going to Costa Rica, how am I going to pay for paint? Not only how am I going to pay for paint, am I going to be able to paint a boat in Costa Rica? Let alone Stuart, Florida. And that just unfortunately drives the costs up. All the pricing increases we're going to take may be overtaken by just the inflation over the next year. And
So there's a lot to worry about. There's a lot to take into consideration. Tommy told me that your first gray hair came after it rained for 40 days and 40 nights.
I'm sorry?
Is that not true?
the ARC actually did suffer a loss. The one
And who underwrote that?
2 years ago. Not me. I think it was probably London for not enough money. But we do, we do try to price business, on a risk-by-risk basis. It's definitely a lot of transactional business, but we can't approach everything on a single loss basis because it's the entire industry. I mean, we're at a point, like I said, London lost 80 cents on the dollar, 180 cents on the dollar. You can't make up that 80 cents and include expenses. These guys don't work for free, and I got to put a daughter through college, so I'm not working for free either. But it's to beat my goal as sort of an older person in this industry is to make sure we have something sustainable so you guys aren't stuck with two companies in a year from now. And I don't want to sound dire, but it could go that way.
It's a business model. It's just
nobody's going to subsidize people that are losing money.
So Mike, tell me about a guy who's got insurance on a boat. Guy has a 62-foot Viking. He's been riding around, no problems, no issues, and a new buyer comes on and wants to buy that boat. Why can't he just take that same insurance company, transfer it to that new guy?
Well, I'd think about it like your home or your auto. You can't, if you buy a car off someone, you can't just inherit his insurance. So the insurance, they're insuring the boat, but everything is based on the buyer. So that previous buyer or that previous owner could have had that insurance policy for 5 years. Rates have changed. We don't know the claims history on the new buyer, the experience on the new buyer, location. It might be beneficial to the new buyer not even to be with that company. So there's a cluster there, but the real way to look at it is it's a brand new policy. There's no way to roll them over because they want to insure that new customer correctly based on the new premiums, obviously, location, and the owner's experience.
So it's a reset.
It's a complete reset. It's a complete reset.
We don't have a whole lot more time left, but I do want to cover one little area. We've talked about the business. We talked about getting it covered. We talked about the challenges that the industry is facing. So we've talked about the transaction, bringing the boat to closing and getting it covered for the closing. Shortly, actually, there are two pieces to this. One is getting to that closing, and when you go to the shipyard to have the boat hauled out for your survey inspection, and the guy who's buying the boat has no interest in that boat financially as yet, but he's got to go up to the office of the boatyard, and he's got to sign the paperwork to have the boat hauled out. So there's a big disconnect there, and then after the fact, when the guy owns the boat and he takes the boat to the boatyard, where does the boat's insurance end? Where does the shipyard's insurance take over? Can you guys give us a snapshot view of that? I know that could be another 2-hour segment.
Where does it or where should it?
Well, where does it and where should it?
Yeah, unfortunately, we, and this has contributed to our results, is you would never, a boat builder really nailed it. He said, you wouldn't bring your car to the shop, hand over your keys for an oil change and a tire rotation, come back at 5 o'clock that day, have the mechanic throw you the keys and say, oh, it fell off of my lift, better call Geico. That's what we're faced with as a hull insurer. Insuring a private owner, I'm taking on the risk of people that are lifting boats, blocking boats. I don't know that they've got the boat drawings and know how to, and are blocking the boats properly. I don't know if they drug test all of their employees. I don't know when the last time the travel lifts were I mean, we can just go on and on for 2 hours. And we usually have to make those decisions about 4:30 at night because the boat's being taken out of the yard tomorrow at 9 and the customer's already signed the contract. That's where, and I think this is really a point of emphasis, is that's where these guys come in from my standpoint. All you guys do in this room is work in the boating business and support the sales of boats, and I know that's broad reaching. All these guys do is boat insurance. They're not doing homeowner insurance. They're not doing auto insurance. They're not doing commercial property insurance. They're dedicated to boats just as much as on a professional side as you guys are. That means something to me. When we're talking about yard contracts, when we're talking about trying to get a 23-year-old captain maybe starting out, having these guys as your customers, advocates, is huge. I can't undervalue the roles that folks in this room from the insurance side that have taken time today, you know, folks like Nancy, folks like John, folks like these guys, to handle your customers. And that's how stuff gets done on Christmas Eve. The guy in New York, their guy in New York, or their guy in, you know, Palm Beach that handles the rest of their stuff, these are the guys you want to send your business to.
We have run up pretty much against a hard stop if you guys want to eat, because I know I do. Are there any quick questions that we have from the audience? Tom, can you shout it out?
One real quick. One of the best programs I ever saw was the Lazera Chuck program. Why has no one come back out with that plan to incentivize the people to take care of their yachts, do a survey once a year, and feed it back? Everybody wins in that program.
Yep.
It's probably one of the best laid out programs I ever saw.
Yeah, the costs for that are about $2,000. So if we charge $20,000, we're giving away 10% for the vessel, the cost of the vessel checkup to start in an environment where people are charging $15,000 for the same risk. That's how those type of things don't occur anymore. I wish it too. I mean, one of the things I look for, I'm not saying I need a survey because the boat's 10 years of age. 10-year-old plastic, 11-year-old plastic, 9-year-old plastic, I don't know the difference. But you tell me that the boat's going into a reputable yard, you know, without naming names, they're going in every 18 months or to a year to a Merritt's, to a Whitaker's or something like that. That means a lot to me, you know. So I think those are things that people should be undertaking themselves just in the care of their boats too. But you know, it's hard for us to subsidize in an environment where we're losing money, additional expense. You know.
Or we put the program in place that's out there. Maybe it's a rethink on the amount of refund that went back to pay for the survey.
Mm-hmm.
But at least there's a plan in place.
Oh yeah.
Because that program works very well.
Yes.
My apologies for no more time for additional questions, although Rick, Tom, and Mike will still be here through the afternoon if we keep an eye on the doors and they don't escape. So if you have questions, you're more than welcome to ask these guys in particular. Thank you very much for your time and contribution. I'm going to TO it to Bob. He's going to send you to lunch.
Yeah, if you're smart, you have a question, you'll sit with these guys at lunch and nail them at that point. So, all right, look, no hesitation. We're gonna, we have an hour and 15 allotted for lunch. We're gonna cut that back a little bit. We'll see how everybody's doing. It's right outside here. Just grab a seat, sit with somebody, do a little networking, and we'll see you in a little bit.